Michael Barker. And lights. So, in honor of, so Michael's been a good friend of the festival for a long time. And he received, when it was called the Overlook Festival, he received a thumb, a golden thumb, that was a long time ago. In honor of Morris Flitcroft, we're giving him a new golden thumb today. He didn't know it, and here it is.
Thank you.
And what is the road to perfection?
You tell me. Practice.
Practice, okay. So we're going to,
Thank you, King.
and for the Q&A, we are going to have Pam Powell and Chuck Kablinski from WCIA. Please join us.
Where would you like me to sit?
They are going to tell you because they're in charge.
Oh, we're in charge. How about next to Pam then?
Okay. I'm very moved to receive this. You know, I don't know if it's because coming out of the pandemic or whatever, I didn't expect to be as moved as I was by the movie and also this whole event. And this was the perfect, you were right, Chaz, this was the perfect movie to show because the character of Morris Flitcroft, you know, I don't know about the rest of you, of people in our lives that are like him, that inspired us. My father was very much like him, you know, and I remember he would spur me on and I'd say, why is he spurring me on? What, you know, but it's a spirit. And how incredible was Mark Rylance playing that guy? I mean, and I really wish he was here.
We're going to bring him one day to Ebertfest because both Mark Rylance and Sally Hawkins are two of my very favorite actors. And I'm glad that you told the audience to keep an eye on Sally Hawkins in here because when I saw the film the first time, I knew she did a lot. But watching her today, I saw how important she was to that story and to their lives and the love story and to those boys, everything. She's just one of my favorite actors.
She's a great actress.
You know, I'd like to start this off by a show of hands from the audience. How many of you are golfers out there? Raise your hands if you're a golfer, even just a summertime fair weather golfer. And how many of you who are raising your hands, keep those hands up, people. How many of you guys are as good of a golfer as Morris? Awesome, we've got a winner in the back.
So we were talking a little bit backstage, and you said that this was one of the films that Sony Pictures Classics got in on the ground floor, helped produce. What was it about this one that spoke to you, said, yeah, we want our name on this?
Well, we had received the screenplay of this movie, and Tom and I and the staff really enjoyed the screenplay. We thought, okay, this is funny. But I had seen Mark Rylance on the stage years and years ago, and he was an incredible comedian on the stage. I mean, you know, in film, we know him more like Bridge of Spies and doing these kind of dramatic works, but he is an incredible comic stage actor. Like, I've seen him like climb up the curtains, you know? You've never seen anything like it. And I remember there was a play he was in on Broadway called Labette. And at one moment in the play, he gave a 29-minute speech sitting in a chair like this. And it was one of the most incredible things I had ever seen an actor do. And it wasn't in like the best written play of all time. And what he did, he was so funny and so in the moment. And also he came to New York and he did Twelfth Night and Richard III. In Richard III, he played Richard III, and he was a fabulous Richard III. Okay. Then in Twelfth Night, he played Olivia, and he was the most incredible Olivia you've ever seen. And so the inventiveness of this guy was so amazing. And then Sony Classics, we had done work with Sally Hawkins before, and we were very close to her. And it was so obvious when we read the screenplay, this was a perfect vehicle for these two great actors. Now, we had to take a risk on the director who had made, I think, 2 other films, but he was an actor first, but he had directed 2 other films with Sally Hawkins, and it was obvious he knew how to connect with the director, with the actors. And so we invested in the film, and we acquired the rights, not only domestically, but other countries. And the film was made during the pandemic, very, very difficult. And it turned out so well. And the idea that I have seen it many, many times, you know, especially when they showed us an early cut and they made changes and this and that. But this is the first time I've seen it with people. And the movie is so moving. It's very moving, you know. In a way, you aren't as touched as you are when you see it on the small screen. So that's one of the reasons we're so happy to have it. And it's going to open June 3rd. So tell all your friends to go.
And speaking of opening, as I understand it, this has already opened in Morris's home country of England as well as Ireland. So
yes, it's a big
what has
hit.
the reaction been there?
A big hit. It's done very, very well. Very well. I don't know what happens with a story like this. We have another movie that we're opening tomorrow in New York called The Duke, which is another
Really
true
good.
story
Really good.
Amazing film.
about an odd group of characters. It's very similar to this movie in that regard. And I think when those stories really happened, people noted them as human interest. But it's only years later, people have totally forgotten about these stories, and here they are, you know.
So, before this, had you ever heard of Morris Flitcroft?
No. No.
So actually, your co-president, Tom Bernard, is the sportsman.
Yes.
Let's make that clear. All right.
Yes, and we have roped in the PGA as well as so many different golf organizations and tournaments to help promote this film, and Tom is really at the forefront of that. Yeah.
You know, out of curiosity, and a lot of films have tried to be made during COVID, and the typical hurdles people have to jump over, as we all did during this pandemic. What are some unusual barricades that maybe you came up against, or maybe some sand traps that you were hitting?
Well, we were not really part of the production in the UK, but I think so many of these films, you know, the budget has to be like 20% higher because of all the precautions. And yesterday, as a matter of fact, I was with Azazel, we're presenting French Exit tonight, and he told me that, do you realize that if we had made that film during the pandemic and now, we probably could not get it made because the increase in the budget was such that it was impossible for him to raise. Yeah.
So it's funny, we talk about COVID, but also things have shifted as far as the delivery method of films and home video and streaming. What challenges has Sony faced with this, and what are things that you're going to have to deal with and change in order to keep current?
Yeah, you know, the history of the movie business has always been adaptation. And I remember when I started at the very beginning of my career, it was like 42, 43 years ago. And It was right before home entertainment started, VHS had started. And in those days, the theatrical could make up 75% of your revenues. But then over the years, things changed. The home entertainment came in. You always had television, but you had more television. The DVDs came in. Then the sell-through on the DVDs went away, and it used to be a real cash cow, and you had to figure out a way to make it up for it. And then there are revenues that come from airlines, there are revenues that come from international. And now what happens is there are revenues from these platforms, and the windowing goes over a long period of time. And I think the chemistry of where the revenues come, it's always changed. And I think even if the chemistry right now is there is less of the percentage of revenues on a given film over time coming from theatrical, and it's coming elsewhere, that doesn't diminish the value of the theatrical release. There's first value just sitting here and watching a movie, and the communal experience of actually watching the film it was meant to see. But the other thing is that marketing push theatrically, which doesn't really cost as much as it used to before because of social media, that is so important. If you don't come to a movie because you've decided it's not safe, or you're not into going to the movie theaters yet, or you go to the movie theaters less as a rule, the marketing push theatrically, you will remember the title if it's a title that makes a mark of distinction, of profile. And if it's a quality film, it's all about the time. It's all about the long tail. You know, you have the Marvel movies, and those movies, which are the tentpoles, they're all about winning the weekend. They're about what happens immediately. But movies like what we have, movies like this, these are the movies that have a very long tail. Now, there's a lot to be said of taking the big money and going to Netflix or Amazon or Apple right off the bat. However, it's a decision you have to make, because a movie like this, if it was just part of the index of when you get on and watch Netflix or Amazon or Apple TV, you might miss it. You're not going to see it. You don't have the benefit of the word of mouth that's going to come out of screenings like this, that's going to come out of the theatrical. So the value of that with a film like this gives the movie a life. And you just have to trust in the revenues of the long tail. And Sony Classics has always been about the long tail from the very, very beginning. I saw Terry Zwigoff earlier today, and we have the movie Crumb from 1993, and I'll tell you now, it is popular now, but it's popular now because it's a movie that deserves the long tail, but you have to work with someone like us who actually nurtures that over decades, and it pays off if it's in the film. If it's in the film.
So your plan is to open this movie in theaters?
Yes.
I was wondering, did you, watching it again today, I know that Maurice Flitcroft passed away, but is there any plan to look for those disco dancing sons, or to bring them around anywhere during the showing of this film?
Absolutely. You know, this other movie, The Duke, with Jim Broadbent and Helen Mirren, we found the grandson who participates in the promotion of the movie. So absolutely, and the writers of the novel and the writer and the director are really into the real people that it's about. It's true. And the thing that happens, it is going to open on June 3rd, and we hope to go wide for Father's Day weekend.
June 3rd, do you know which cities?
Well, it'll be New York and LA, but then 2 weeks later, whenever Father's Day weekend is, 3 weeks later, we will be much wider everywhere in the country. And but there's so much to talk about adapting to the new world order with the streaming and adapting to COVID. You know, when we had the film The Father last year, it was in the middle of COVID, and we really didn't know how to release it. We knew we had to release it before the Academy deadline because we wanted Hopkins in the picture to have a shot, and the screenwriter and the director. And so what we did was we opened it on the very last date of the qualification. Because of COVID, it was like February 28th, and it qualified, and we played in New York and LA, and then we opened in other cities, but there were so few theaters opened around the country, and you couldn't do the wide release at that time. And so we worked with Sony Home Entertainment and Television and have the PVOD available during the Academy period, of where you pay $19.99, and we said, look, if you don't feel comfortable going to the theater, or the theater's not open near you, that was the process in which we did with the film. And of course it did, like $2 to $3 million in the theaters, but then it did like 4 times as much with the PVOD. So in a way, it was a way to keep it alive. We find ways of keeping it alive. And that film, I was speaking with the heads of home entertainment the other day, and they were shocked how today, a year later, the film is doing so much business on VOD, on television, on all the platforms and so forth. It's proof of this long tail idea. But I think if we hadn't done the theatrical, if we had freaked out, which we almost did when the pandemic started, and sold it to Netflix or Amazon, I don't know if it would have had that life. I don't think it would have had that revenue life or that word of mouth we're talking about.
I have only one more comment, and then I'm going to leave it to actually our stars up here are Pamela and Chuck, and they have a TV show and a radio show and a podcast, everything. I am so sorry. I should have given you a proper introduction because you two are the stars up here. I just want to say, when I was watching The Masters a few weeks ago, I thought about this film, and even though I tuned in only because to watch the sort of the comeback, not even a comeback of Tiger Woods, I was just interested in a human interest story of the Masters. And so even a non-golfer like me was interested in that. And I was thinking about this film, and because there was one point when I was watching the film when the boys said, Dad, if we had had a better dad who didn't make us shoot, reach for the stars, maybe they could have been better people. And it made me wonder, what is the responsibility of the parents? Do you encourage your kids to reach their highest, or do you, and then for America to have the Morris Flitcroft Golf Invitational was just incredible to me, so.
When I was a boy, I loved the movies. From the time I was 5, I'd go to the movies. And I remember my father, when I was in high school and even college, he would get a lot of pressure from all of his peers saying, "Is a guy going to be a lawyer? Is going to be a doctor? Is going to be my stepmother said my dad would always say to her, I wonder if this movie thing is ever going to pay off." But he would never stand in the way, never stand in the way. It's a view of letting people find themselves and what they love. I don't know about all of you, but when I was in my 20s, and I know a lot of people when I talk to are in their 20s, and they love something, like I love the movies, they love something, and they're surrounded by peers that are very successful in their eyes. They make money, and whether on Wall Street or this or that, and they think, we should be doing something like that. And I always tell them, wait a minute, you've got to do what you love, because I'll tell you something, check in on those people 20 years later, and if you're doing what you love, I'm not sure you're going to feel the same way. So.
Real talk, Chuck and Pam, go right ahead.
I have one other question for you. Talking about your love of movies when you were younger, and is there a movie that really influenced you and how you see your current company? I feel like there's a through line with a lot of the movies that you have in your company now. Is there something from your past that you bring into the current day?
My favorite movie today was my favorite movie when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
And it totally influenced my life and still does. And that's Rear Window.
Oh.
Rear
My
Window.
blouse.
Yeah. And because I remember when I took a Shakespearean class and I thought, I don't know how to read Shakespeare. And it hit me. Rear Window is how to read Shakespeare. You got all those windows, you got all those plots, you got all those characters. This is what happens. This is what life is like, you know. And when you move to New York and you live opposite those buildings, as I do right now, you see all those windows. It's like it's a context for living your life every day, where we have our own little story. We're the guy in the wheelchair, you know, watching everybody, and everyone has their own story, and movies are just like a microcosm of it. It's like a distillation of it in a kind of dramatic way, a way to engage. And I watch it every year, and it is as good now as it was before. Anyway, yes.
Just real quick, I know you're approached with many films, many ideas, any that have gotten away
Many,
that man, we should have went with that one.
so many.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Well, some have gotten away because and Tom, we just didn't get it, you know. But some have gotten away because we really wanted it. But also others have gotten away. When we look at a movie or a screenplay, we always take it on because we feel we have a roadmap to make it successful. But there are a lot of movies you see that are incredible, but you say, I don't know how to make that work in the marketplace. I remember when I saw the Kiarostami movies in Cannes, you know, and I would go, those are incredible. Those are masterpieces, and but we don't know how to make that palatable for a big enough audience not to lose money. So we back off of some of those films. I used to back off of all those Dardenne movies for that reason, and I was so moved. But I remember we had two of them, and one of them, okay, Chaz, okay, I'm going to tell this story. One of them was the child, l'enfant. And you and Roger were in Cannes. You thought it was great. And I went to the closing night ceremony and a party afterwards, and it won the Palme d'Or. And I remember the Dardenne brothers were standing there. And I just said, it's a masterpiece. It's really fantastic. Well, I'm going to tell you the key to get to me, right? So I said, it's great, but I don't know how to make this work in America. And one of the Dardenne brothers said, Michael, have you ever bought a movie with your heart? I was like, oh, man. So I called Tom, said, okay, this guy said this to me. Maybe we should do this. So we bought it for like $75,000. Oh my God. Yeah. It was a great movie. They're masters. They're masters. But it's not easy. Yeah. It's not easy, those movies. But then you hit the mother lode, you know. I remember when Ang Lee came to us, a graduate
Of the University
of
of Illinois
Illinois.
here, yes.
Ang Lee came to us, and we had wanted Wedding Banquet, Eat, Drink, Man, Women, but we didn't get them because he had this relationship, he and James Seamus, with the Sam Goldwyn Company. And he said, you know, the movie I'd really like to make is an artistic martial arts movie about women empowerment. But it's got to be in Chinese. It's got to have a lot of subtitles. And what do you think? Tom and Tom and I always wanted to do that. And when the time came, he had had 2 films that were not so successful. One was called Ride with the Devil. He said, okay, I'm ready to do this. And so we got involved at the very beginning of that film. And I don't think anyone predicted that film was going to do $128 million in the U.S.
That was Crouching Tiger,
Crouching
Hidden
Tiger,
Dragon.
Hidden Dragon. And it was by far, by 5 times the most successful foreign film ever in the U.S.
Well, that's
So
a
you
good,
never know.
That's
You
a
never
good,
know what's going to happen, you know?
That's a good segue to we move to our audience, and we have someone out. We have to bring the lights up. We have someone out there to help us in case there are questions from the audience. Here's someone right here in the front row. Do you have your microphone there?
It was a funny movie, very touching. I've been married for 37 years and had enormous support from my wife, and I teared up several times during this. And I figured it was because of my own relationships. And then after the movie was over, there's somebody upstairs who's half my age, and he was blowing his nose saying, "This really got to me." And I thought, you have done an excellent job with this movie. And I just want to let you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I teared up too, and I was surprised at that. Yeah.
Where are the microphones and where are the hands?
In the balcony,
Balcony.
in the center,
Balcony Center.
right here.
And tell us your name, please.
My name is David Dorman, and the question I have is, I assume that this was a 35 millimeter projector. Is that correct? And the follow-up is, do you think that the digital projections have changed the experience of movies in any way?
First of all, this is a DCP. It's not a 35 millimeter. Most theaters are not equipped with 35 millimeter, although I know this one is. You know, so many filmmakers prefer the digital. Even Mike Lee prefers it now. But when you see what Paul Thomas Anderson and some of these other filmmakers do with 35 millimeter, often I miss it because it has a texture in the film quality that you watch. It's a texture you don't have with the digital. So, but the trend is obviously digital. I hope that 35 is not totally obsolete, but it's getting there.
We're showing 35 millimeter Saturday night of Nightmare Alley, Guillermo del Toro's film.
Wow. Wow.
Question?
A question from the last row of the floor to your left, just a bit.
Yes. And your name, please.
Joe, I thought the music was really brilliant in this film, and I was wondering if you could give a little insight on the decision-making process by which the particular music was chosen.
Well, I think that's the director, and I agree with you. Watching it this time, I realized how brilliant every one of those selections were. And they worked really hard on it, and the music changed as the different cuts happened.
Question?
In the balcony, in the center.
Balcony Center. And your name, please.
Okay. Hi, my name is Susanna, and first I just want to say I've told some other people this. This is our first time back since 2013 when we had a kid the next year, and we're so excited to be here.
Great.
And so excited to see all sorts of old friends like all of you. So, anyway, my husband and I have been doing a lot of talking about streaming versus the joy of seeing films in the theaters, which, you know, we finally went back to the theater to see Dune, which was this giant, expansive film that we were so happy to see. But also then you're looking at a film like this where it's wonderful to see with other people, but also the scale of the film is such that you really could enjoy it, you know, at home streaming. I guess what kinds of things have you seen, and how have you seen, I guess, some of the movie practices of watching evolve, and where do you think they might be going, particularly with all these different sorts of movies?
Here's what the tentpole films like Dune, Marvel, all of these, they're going to continue. They're going to flourish. That continues. I also believe films like this, the smaller scale kind of independent films, that's going to continue as a business too. The issue are all those movies in between. And in the 70s and the 80s, all the great movies we know that the studios made were those movies in between. But now the big studios are making less of those, which worries me about film culture. However, I will say, whether it's the streamers or HBO, that the quality of a lot of the films and series that are going on now are kind of taking the place of some of those mid-level films. I mean, I don't know if you've watched this Apple Plus series called Slow Horses with Gary Oldman and Kristen Scott Thomas. It's as good as any movie, and you're just, wow. So this is what is kind of taking up what we're starting to miss from the studios. But I really worry about what's going to happen to film culture that those movies can be made. McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Nashville, the Jonathan Demme movies, I just hope those movies can continue to be made the way PTA's movies continue to be made. I'm a big fan of Paul Thomas Anderson's. I think he's a continuation of that period.
During the pandemic, I started watching series I never really did before, and two of the ones that I really loved were The Queen's Gambit and also The Last Dance about the Bulls.
Oh, I didn't see
I watched
that.
all 10 episodes of it. Didn't think I would, but they actually have a lot of things going. But I also worry about, I would hate to give up this experience of seeing movies, not just tentpole movies, but other movies in theaters with audience and with nice sound projection and everything.
You know, I'm a good friend of Norman Jewison's, as is Chaz, and with the passing of Sidney Poitier, I was watching some of those films, and you watch In the Heat of the Night, and it really scares me that studios don't make those movies anymore. It's one thing for the little boutique kind of operations or niche operations like me to do this, but I just worry about the loss of that kind of film.
I'm getting the signal that we have, there you, right there.
Floor to your left, to your right.
Okay.
Hi, Steve Medoff, and I have a question about the cooperation you got from the golf associations and how that worked. I know that on a trip to England one time, my wife and I went to St. Andrews, and of course it rained all day. Not that we were going to play a round of golf, but it seemed so typical of what goes on with the British Open. I wanted you to comment on the cooperation that you got from the golf associations.
Well, I'm not the right person to answer that question. I know that the novelist and the writer, these two gentlemen, they spent over 10 years working on this story. So my guess is, and the feeling I have, especially the novelist, he was very connected and became very connected to the golfing community. And if you watch the end of the film, it's like they finally come around, to see the value. So I don't think they had any difficulty. It's like, I thought for a moment when Tom said, I want to show it to all these golf pros, the real professionals, I want to show them the film and see what they think. And I thought, they may have a real issue with the film. But No, they kind of get into the fun of it. They get into the satire of themselves too, so.
So I think that's the last question. Oh, we have someone who was standing there. Let's take one more question from the audience.
Here we go.
Yeah, just one more question. A few of us were wondering, the actor Mark Ryland, who played Maurice Flitcroft and the Frenchman, did you say that he was from England and
Yes.
Ireland? He's not from Australia.
No,
Okay, England and Ireland.
I can't remember. I think it's London, yeah? I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking, London. Okay, well, thanks, I'm just curious.
And help me thank Mark,
Thank you.
Michael Barker, Pamela Powell, and Chuck
you.
Kablinski.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and our next film starts at, will somebody tell me the time? 1:30. What time is it now?
You
Oh,
have
okay.
to come see that movie at 1:30 because the way to see that movie is on this screen. I promise you, it's incredible. 39 Steps.
39 Steps, our Alfred Hitchcock at 1:30. We'll see you back.